Hello, this is your host Akhil Navluri, and welcome to the very brand new episode of the TechnoSpace podcast series. In this podcast episode, I'm super thrilled and privileged to welcome one of the most eminent and prominent industry leaders of the IT industry and the enterprise architecture space, Mr. John Gøtze, who happens to be the CEO of EFLS and also the lecturer at Carnegie Mellon University of United States of America. And talking about him, this gentleman is based out of Slangerup, the capital region of Denmark, based out of Denmark. So, John, it gives me an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this podcast initiative of mine. So, John, how are you doing? And I would take it on from you. So, would you like to, introduce about yourself to our audience in depth?
All right. Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate being here. And yeah, my name is John. I've been working in the industry for many years, and especially in enterprise architecture. I started my journey in enterprise architecture, actually many years ago, long before many people knew of enterprise architecture. And it all goes sort of back to the beginning of my studies. After I finished high school, I kind of I think I've always known I wanted to be an engineer, but I was not sure what type of engineering. I thought technology is fascinating, but not sort of any particular one. Of course, later I found out that IT is special, but I actually started studying engineering in the mid 80s, and looked around. So I started actually looking in sort of what today would be sustainability studies, so energy supply, waste management, all kinds of energy storage and sustainability, climate issues, environmental issues. And that brought me into that there's a need for wider and bigger transformations in society. And that has stayed with me ever since. I didn't call it enterprise architecture back then, but I actually, soon after John Sackman published some of his early work in enterprise architecture, I picked that up. And it was inspirational for when I chose to do a PhD. I was a guest student in England at what was called Brighton Polytechnic then, and they had a great research environment where I met a professor of urban planning from Japan, from Waseda University, who became my, actually lifelong friend, but also mentor. And he talked about urban planning, and I thought that's so fascinating. So I want to do that. And he invited me to come over to Japan when if I wanted to do my PhD. So I decided to do a PhD. I got a scholarship from the Danish government and started my PhD at the Technical University of Denmark, but with the assumption that it was a collaboration with Waseda University. And that was about involving stakeholders in decision-making in urban planning, especially in highly complex situations. So, for example, we looked at what would happen if there were a big earthquake in Tokyo, because we know that will happen sometime, and how do we involve stakeholders in that, because that's really a biggest shit show of ever kind of situation. So how do we work with that in highly complex and tense situations? We toned it down a bit and said, well, how do we prepare cities for sort of more resiliency? And that's where I started thinking about sort of this architecture of the city with all the layers that need to work for a city to be livable and also to survive big changes like an earthquake. Of course, we never have earthquakes in Denmark, so that was not a scenario for Denmark, but we do have transformations and big rapid changes. So this idea of layered thinking, that there's so many things that depend on each other, that stuck with me during my PhD, and I sort of took a deep dive into democratic theory, sort of theory of decision making and involving people, um, and that sort of opened my mind for sort of the sociology of the enterprise. A city is the biggest enterprise you can imagine, I guess. Um, but all kinds of enterprises have this sort of complexity of all the things that need to work together. And that made me pick up enterprise architecture, which was a
Right.
emerging field at that time in building up to Y2K, the millennium thing there. Of course, IT became more and more complex, and enterprises became more and more dependent on IT and digital solutions. And with the millennium bug, we saw, ooh, we better build better IT so we don't see that problem again. I was actually involved because after my PhD, I was invited to come to Sweden, work for the Swedish government, build the first national plan for e-government and e-democracy in Sweden.
Okay.
So I became a civil servant and by heart an architect. But in Sweden, it didn't work at least that time in the 90s to call it architecture. But I used the architectural thinking, the urban planning thinking throughout my work in Swedish government, and became an expert in e-government, e-democracy, um, and that was fun. I had some interesting projects, worked with many different kinds of people in the Swedish government, in the Swedish IT industry, in the global community, where I started working with a handful of people who were interested in enterprise architecture back then. Um, it didn't quite work in Sweden to roll out enterprise architecture as a whole of government approach, because every government agency and every municipality and so on in Sweden wants to be very decentralized and very independent. That's also in the constitution in Sweden. So coordinating something across was a challenge, but we did
Yep.
what we could. But then I met a guy from Denmark who ran a small agency about providing public information to citizens. He built the first national government portal in Denmark, and he said, "John, come to Denmark. We'll do something fun." Um, so I packed my bags from Sweden. It was 6 good years I had there, and returned to Denmark. Um, and had some talks with him. It was a small agency, some 100 people working there, mainly around citizen information and this national portal. So that was interesting. But we also had more ambitions to really change government. So we had a secret plan, the director there and myself. We said we'll start a national enterprise architecture program.
Right.
And I mean, as the director general, he had funding. So he said, well, go out and find some people you want to bring on here, and then we'll start this. And then we asked for permission from the rest of government and so on. So we started this initiative, a handful of experts, um, and it became the National Enterprise Architecture Program. So a big, well, not big compared to many other things, but a very ambitious program, because we got to invite people from all over government, and also the Minister of Science and Technology who was
Okay.
responsible. He didn't quite understand, but you know, ministers, they never quite understand what
Yeah, yeah,
they deal with. But they had
exactly.
some good people, and we had fun. So it became actually We roll out, for example, mandatory interoperability standards. We started a training schema for civil servants to become enterprise architects. I teamed up with the newly formed IT University of Copenhagen, where I knew the vice chancellor, and he convinced me to come and teach at the university. So alongside being a civil servant, I became a university professor, part-time teacher, and taught enterprise architecture for young students there. And that was part of the government plan. So I had sort of good mandate to do that. And that also meant that the enterprise architecture thinking kind of went viral because all these students were ambitious and they got jobs in all kinds of consultancy firms and IT firms and government agencies and so on. So it spread like a wildfire, kind of the architecture
Yeah.
thinking. That was really good. So basically, and I kept when we published a white paper on enterprise architecture for the government. The first chapter was we need to think about urban planning of technology in government, that all the layers. So I use the city planning metaphor to explain enterprise architecture. And I mean, that works. Since then, I saw Gartner picked up the city planning metaphor. If you go to a random university course today, they still use city planning as a metaphor for enterprise architecture because it works. It's exactly the same stuff we're doing. Sadly, very few practicing enterprise architects today have any idea about city planning. But that's another thing we can talk about. But so I see a traction, continuity from my early studies to my practice today as an enterprise architect.
That's a brilliant timeline, John. It's really, really inspiring, and a lot of variety of, a lot of versatility and a lot of diversity. I mean, in your journey, I would surely say. Now, John, you just mentioned a point to me stating that e-governance and e-decentralized, or let's say e-democracy. What do you exactly, infer by these two terms?
Well, back there in the 90s, we didn't say digital as we do today. We said e something for electronic. It's exactly the same as we use today for digital, but it's sort of so digital government online we called it then, because previously government was something if you as a citizen or a company needed to deal with government, you had to go and visit their office or send them a paper mail. A letter, or fill out an application on paper and hand it in, and so on. Old school.
Old school methods, yeah.
So moving government online was the ambition of sort of the digital transformation we needed to go through. So we in Sweden, in the government, we made sort of a maturity model where first step would be just bring out the government agency on a website, because the World Wide Web was new back then. So build a website, and then gradually make it more interactive so you can search in databases and find documents, download reports and forms and so on. Next stage would be fill out forms, hand them in electronically, online. And the last stage was the transformational stage, where we change so it's connected government. We have a single view from the citizen's point of view, that I need to do something, but it's actually 8 government agencies, and then they need to collaborate. It's not my obligation as a citizen to run around to all these 8 agencies. It's the government, the whole of government perspective that needs to be in the center. So it was really also citizen-centric. And that's where the democracy perspective came in. One of the projects I ran in Sweden was we had a minister. I worked for a minister of democracy, believe it or not. There was a minister of democracy in Sweden at that time.
Okay. Right.
And she was an old trade unionist, young, didn't quite, I mean, she was very much a politician, but also untraditional kind of in the bureaucracy. So she had a pet project there about bringing the Swedish parliament and all laws, all regulations, every legal document in Sweden from government, bring that online. So she asked me to chair a working group
Wow.
where we built a government portal with all legal information. And that was amazing because she called me uh, sort of out of the order of the civil service. So normally, if the minister wants to talk to a civil servant, there's steps
Yeah.
and bosses and managers and all kinds of things. She just called me and asked, John, come over for lunch. We want to talk about this here. So I helped build the first Swedish legal information system. Then she said, "Wow, this is cool. We can do a lot with this online stuff. So why don't we start a program with some 20-ish government agencies about their service to their citizens or businesses, their users?" So I became the program manager for that one also. And the whole thing of bringing stuff online. I mean, this it's still what we do, but it's I mean, we do much more than bring it online because we've had World Wide Web for so many years. But if you go to a random website for a government agency or even a private company, I would say, they are still very immature. It's
Hmm.
amazing that so few people actually use the web technologies to something that is truly transformative for the users. But that also just means we have lots of work to do tomorrow, not just today and yesterday. And it's taken 30 years so far. So let's see over the next 30 years, because there's truly transformational stuff. And new technologies and of course the AI revolution and all that stuff is part of all of this. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a brilliant initiative, John. And really, really, I was totally inspired when you just, joined hands with a lot of influential people, and actually that gave you a lot of, exposure with respect to the, the different diversities in the tech market and with respect to the enterprise architecture space. Now, John, now heading on for the next one. So, John, would you like to give me a deep insight about your consulting company, the EFLS, and what are the key areas and domains of your consulting company at the moment?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that question. So after my stint in government, I stayed with the Danish government for some 5 years or something. Then I took we had obviously we also used consultants then. So I asked some of the consultants I had used in the government, especially one of them, sort of, isn't it time for us to start a company? He was
Okay.
leading the biggest. Uh, it was called Meta Group then. Most people don't know Meta Group today because they were acquired by Gartner 20 years ago. But he was their consulting director for Scandinavia. So very experienced consultant. And he didn't like them being acquired by Gartner. So I knew there was an opportunity. So I sort of said, Alan, let's build a company. I'll leave government, you leave Meta Gartner, and we'll build a company. We take a few friends with us on this journey and establish a boutique consultancy specializing in enterprise architecture. And there were several opportunities we wanted. First of all, the IT industry at large was very interested in what government was doing because we were
Yeah.
very independent. And in government, I mean, I'm opportunist in that sense. So when I was a civil servant, a program manager for this EA program in government, I called the managers in IBM, in CSC, and in all kinds of companies and said, well, we have this program. And they said, yeah, we know it's great stuff you're doing, but please involve us more. And I said, well, okay, bring me your best people, and we have a room in the agency where all our consultants work. We don't pay you. See it as a in-company training for senior people. And they loved the idea because, I mean, these people, they had their salaries already and so on. And it was like planting a spy, fully legitimate kind of spy, who could sit in meetings and so on. So I had a big group of consultants when I was the program manager. So when we started EFLS, we just handpicked some of the best ones that we trusted and said, well, come and join us. It's a pity for IBM and for blah, 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 that we steal you, but they don't own you. So we had a group of very experienced people when we started EFLS, and it was always meant as very senior, kind of very experienced consultants. We didn't want to grow by hiring lots of young people. Actually, I changed my mind several times on that, but the formation was boutique enterprise architecture consultancy delivered by the most experienced people you could find. So that was attractive. So we did consultancy, we helped IT companies, we obviously helped government agencies. We started working also in the private sector because they were bad at enterprise architecture also. So we got quite a lot of a very nice customer portfolio there. In parallel, I was very inspired by sort of the academic stuff. As I mentioned, I started working with the IT university, and I've always been interested in sort of reading, obviously, as a former researcher. And I picked up a book that we actually used when we built the Danish government EA framework from a guy called Scott Bernard over in the US. Introduction to Enterprise Architecture. He published that in 2004, and I reached out to him and said, well, we want to use your framework in government in Denmark, so come over to Denmark and keynote at a conference and blah, blah, blah. And he became a good friend, basically. And he told me, well, he's starting a certification program with Carnegie Mellon University. And I thought, well, apart from Harvard and Stanford, Carnegie Mellon University was the only university in the US I really knew, because they were CMMI and big in security and big in IT and so on. So I thought, wow, that's cool. And he invited me to run that program, a professional certification. He invited me to run that in Europe. Still Carnegie Mellon University certification, but I ran the program in Europe. So since we started there, and was it 2007 or something, we've been doing teaching in, well, obviously in Denmark, in Sweden, in Norway, in Netherlands, in Belgium, in Germany, well, all over the place, Finland, and now we brought it online, so I have students all over the place. I'm running one now in India.
All right.
And we've worked in Australia. I have a client in Tanzania, so it could be fun to travel, but I'm getting too old for that, I think, and I'm not sure I wanted to go. Actually, also I did in Iran. Don't want to go to Iran right now. But anyway, so it's becoming more of a global thing. It's not at the size of Open Group, which is a big machinery with 50 people and so on. This is more low key, but that's also how I like it, because it's more agile. If I see something I want to change and so on, I just do it, because I took over the ownership Dr. Bernard, he retired, so he left the ownership of the whole program to me. So it's also EFLS in that sense. So big in training, certification, and big in consulting, boutique consulting, specialized in enterprise architects. So our typical clients are, well, in the certification, people who want to get into this, but for EA consultancy, it's typically companies and organizations who have tried enterprise architecture. They might have gotten some of their people certified in TOGAF or in other approaches, but it didn't quite, it didn't work. People leave, and the CIOs and CTOs and CEOs and so on are unhappy with the EA and so on. And then they call me and say, come and help us. We need to reinvigorate the whole EA approach here. And that's kind of work I love, because I can basically measure the improvements day to day almost. So typical engagements sort of help us get EA practice back in order, or even just get it in order, because it never really matured. Other engagement could be, for example, help us build a target architecture. We're ambitious, we got the idea of EA, now we actually want to build a target architecture for the next step, next generation of our architecture practice.
Right.
I love doing target architecture work, because that's also sort of envisioning what's next, what are the burning issues, and so on, and how do we deal with that. It's stakeholder engagement. It's, again, back to all the layers of a city. It's all the layers of the agency, upcoming legislation, poor processes, big technical debt, all the stuff we know from enterprises, and change that into a sort of target state architecture where it's the more beautiful architecture stuff. I love doing that. I've done a few projects over the last 5 years with big, bulky government agencies. That's one of the types of engagements I really love, because that's also about envisioning something completely different, something new. So in EFLS, I mean, I don't have growth ambitions in that sense. I should have hired more people, probably, if I wanted to grow, but I don't want to be sort of spending 80% of my day managing people. I want to do something with my clients and so on. But a few years ago, one of my former students, she was also my teaching assistant at the university in Copenhagen. She was just brilliant. So during Corona, she left to Cyprus because the weather is better in Cyprus. She actually comes from Riga in Latvia, in the Baltic states. But she lived in Denmark, did her university studies in Denmark and so on, but went to Cyprus. And during Corona, I thought, I want to hire someone. I'm too lonely in the company, because the other old partners left or passed away, actually, some of them and so on. But things change. I mean, it's 20 years. So so I called this young woman and said, Senja, I want to hire you. You've been my best teaching assistant ever, and you're very smart. So come work for me. I don't quite know how we will make it, because we will find out on the journey. So she loved the idea. So she came working for me, returned to Denmark after Corona, yeah, so she's been working for me for, gosh, I don't know, what is it now, 5 years or something? When was Corona? Yeah, 5 years or so, yeah.
Okay.
So she's my research assistant now. She does consulting. She does sort of key account management kind of work. So she does everything you do in a small company. Sometimes she develops our ideas, sometimes I develop the ideas and she refines them. Sometimes I deliver
Okay.
to the market, and sometimes she helps me. Sometimes she delivers. We went to a conference in London a few weeks ago. I was the first name in the program, but she actually delivered 80-90% of the program in our workshop. So big respect for her, a young person, but wow, she's bright and good. So I thought maybe I should hire more people, because it's great having especially young people and see them grow. Um, but I don't know. It's also nice to be flexible in terms of saying, well, I don't want to do something. I want to sit and write something this month instead of go out earning money and so on. It's okay if I only have one person and myself. If I had a whole group of people, I would need to be more responsible, kind of. And I'm not sure I want to do that, but it's nice
Right.
working with young people for sure. Also senior people, but
Yeah.
yeah. So that was a bit on EFLS. I think I drifted a bit there, but anyway, based in Slangerup here, northwest of Copenhagen, but it's just my home basically. I used to have an office in Copenhagen, but realized that after Senior moved back to Riga, she wanted to be with her family and friends. Fully understandable. And most of our work is remote anyway, so it doesn't matter. I had an office in Copenhagen, but I canceled that 2 months ago because I realized I never go there. It's too much of a commute, and I have everything I need here at home. So it's a small company working from home, but clients don't see that because we meet them online typically, or I
Yeah.
go to the clients. And
Yeah.
right now I'm starting which will hopefully turn to a full-time engagement. I do more of a fractional kind of approach most often. So whenever I'm needed there, maybe 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week sometimes and so on. But I think after the summer, we will ramp up for full time because we need to do a lot of stuff. It's also government, but it's in the defense. So it's the Danish defense, and obviously the defense is one of the areas where we need to ramp up for. I mean, there might be a war. Uh, Denmark has been in wars in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and whatnot, but sort of send some troops down there and deal with it. It's a more sensitive situation now that we don't know if the Russians will invade and so on. So it's more, yeah, well, uh, serious. I always said serious. Of course, it's always been serious, but the closer to real action it gets, the more resilient and the more ready and so on. So they're investing heavily in buying new arms and new stuff. So it's the biggest transformation in Danish government, you could say, in that sense, at least in terms of the spending and so on. It's huge expenses if you want to go and buy new military equipment and so on.
Yep.
So they want me to help there, and I think it's interesting. I don't know the language, and they have lots of acronyms, but I'm learning,
Yeah.
and I'm sort of. Yesterday when we had a meeting with one of the big vendors, uh, I was asked to present myself, and I called myself an architecture whisperer to the management.
Architecture whisperer. Why? Why like that?
No, because it's sort of whispering to the manager, you want to say this, don't say that, and so on. But anyway, it's gonna be hardcore architecture work, defining architecture standards, uh, defining architecture methods, and telling vendors to do it this way, not that way, and so on. It's challenging because this vendor yesterday is CMMI level 5 accredited, so they have processes and so on. They know their work. They're bloody expensive because they literally deliver some of the core systems to defense. But they're very professional, I must say. Uh, and I love working with very professional people also. I love also teaching and taking people who are not very good and professional to the next level, but I also like to work with the best of the best kind of. So it's interesting.
That's a pretty interesting project coming up for you, John, in the future with respect to the military point of view. And also, I just love the way, you were just putting across your goals that you have envisioned for your company, and the multitude of people that you have actually worked with, and the person who was from Riga, Latvia. So that was a pretty good good kind of an insight that you have given on that. Now, John, now I just wanted to understand this. I'm pretty keen to understand this. Like, first we talked about your CEO life. Now we're going to talk head to the next one. So, John, are there any key similarities that you have observed while working as a lecturer at the Carnegie Mellon University, like which is the societal and software systems, to that of being the CEO of your consulting company, EFLS?
Yeah. That's a nice question. I actually thought about it because for me, it's very natural. Since I started EFLS, I also worked in the university setting as a part-time teacher. So it's always been hand in hand. Um, and I think, well, to be frank, sometimes I might forget where I am at. So some of my clients say, John, you're a bit too academic now. You're not at the university. But anyway, when
Right.
I think about it, I think I do cross-fertilization very well, that
Mhm.
I bring my clients and say, actually, guys, you need to read a book. So let's set up some sessions. We'll make a private university kind of thing for you because you need to read some books in order to improve on this one. So that's where I see the direct connections. But I think when it's about sort of what we do, I think much of the stuff the good university professors do is actually very akin to good consulting and coaching. We take somebody in the hand and say, you're on a learning journey here, and let's help you. The bad university professors, I mean, we all experience bad university professors, I'm sure. And they are more sort of like a evil dentist kind of. It's an operation and it has to be painful kind of thing. I tried that as a young student at the Technical University with a professor who loved um, sort of asking questions, and if the student didn't answer right, the professor would humiliate the students and so on. We all know that from other either private experience or from films and so on. But the good professors, they take a deep interest in each and every student and take them on a journey and see it as a growth for personal growth of the young person, um, and celebrate the victories. Regardless of how well they do compared to other students and so on. And I think that's the same we do as consultants. If we're good consultants, we help whoever we're hired there to help, and make sure that we engage all the stakeholders and make stakeholders happy with whatever is happening, not just rely on the person with the most stars,
Hmm.
on this sort of the hippo, the highest paid person syndrome,
Okay.
um, which is a classic anti-pattern. and maybe one of the biggest destroyers of collaboration in the enterprise. So there's lots of similarities from teaching at a university and doing consulting and coaching with clients. And more should learn how it works together, because it's too much silo thinking. And when I see fresh graduates from universities, some of the good graduates, newly educated and get a new job, there are some who are very good, but there's also a lot where we need to start with a lot of unlearning, because now welcome to the real world kind of situation. So I
Exactly.
think, and I've been practicing that ever since I started basically in my professional career, because I took this sort of after my PhD. I got a job in government, so I experienced myself sort of being an academic, a researcher, and then meeting reality out there. And I think I've just brought that over the 30 years in my career, and see more of a crossover as an advantage, um, rather than a limitation. So yeah,
Exactly. That's a brilliant, what do I say, that, a cross-cultural land, or let's say, enjoying the best of both worlds, as they say in English.
yeah,
That I really love the key similarities where you gave. End of the day, it's all about, learning and understanding the things, and, reading a book where, you understand the foundations and the basics of stuff.
yeah.
Right.
So
Right, John.
yeah,
Yeah, John. So what's up? Yeah.
another part of this with the crossover, you can see my background picture.
Yeah.
That was a meme on the internet a few years ago about putting your published books on a Persian carpet. So I happen to
Okay.
have published a number of books.
Okay.
And that's another part of the academic training that I love, that I'm able to write books and stuff. I published a number of a long number of peer-reviewed articles and so on, but nobody reads them. Books, that's a bigger chance of people actually noticing them. It's been more than 10 years ago I published my latest book, but I'm sort of thinking maybe it's time to do something again, because I have lots of things I want to get out there. Um, of course, many people don't want to read books today. I read a lot still, because I think that's a major source of learning, but
Exactly.
lots
Yeah.
of people never read books, and it's such a shame, because there's so many good books out there. I mean, not just my books, which I'm proud of, but many relevant books out there in the community that architects should really study and learn. Um, so more people should go to university, or at least pick up books and read books.
Exactly. John, I mean, if you offer me your book, I would definitely love to read it, because I'm a person who has a zest of, reading multiple books. So I would definitely try my hands on with respect to your, published books
Sure,
for
sure.
sure.
I'll send you some PDF files. No problem.
That's amazing. That's good to know, John. Now, John, would you like to, share your expertise on the lines of, the digital transformation and architecture management? Like, what's your call on that?
Well, digital transformation is a buzzword these years, even though it's been around for 30 or 40 years in many ways. As I mentioned, in the Swedish policy report we did in 98 or something, when was it?
Mhm.
We actually talked about transformation. So for me, digital transformation is when we think all matters of digital in the enterprise. So digital is partly the old, more boring kind of operational backbone, the ERP or the core banking system or whatever sector we're in. We have some key systems that's been running, and it's a disaster if they go down and so on. So digital there is really about keeping the lights on, kind of.
Yep.
Um, which is important, and people need to do that. We need strong enterprise architecture for that. And fortunately, some of the big vendors, at least they pay lip service to enterprise architecture there. So SAP have their own EA Academy and all that type of stuff. I wish they talk more about the whole enterprise architecture, not just their own platform. But anyway, so that's core to the enterprise, the operational backbone, as it's called sometimes. That's one part of digital transformation. The other part is probably what we normally think about as digital transformation. That's the new business models coming in, new opportunities, innovation in the ways of working, innovations in new ways of making products, or even bringing new types of products to the market. So that's the other side of it. So sort of the digital platform is sometimes just called, because it's innovation. It's a new platform. If we have an old operational backbone, ERP, and blah, 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 we extract some of the stuff and build a new platform and actually sell the customer's data back to the customer sometimes. But
Right.
it works. So in that sense, digital transformation is a way of walking on two legs, kind of. It's also called ambidextrous organizations that are good at
Yeah.
that. Sort of like ambidextrous persons are people who are able to write with both hands. Very few people can do that, but those who can, well, they have an advantage in that sense. And similar for
Yeah.
organizations. If we're good at running the business and renewing, innovating, we're the best in both kinds of worlds. Most enterprises are good in only one camp, but true digital transformation means that we need to be both innovative but also exploitative. I mean, there's lots of solid literature on this here. From Stanford and Harvard, the O'Reilly and Tushman people, professors wrote about the ambidextrous organization 20 more than 20 years ago in HBR, and some great books, Lead and Disrupt and so on. Huge respect for their work. But also in the digital world, MIT, Jeannie Ross, she led their EA research for many years until she retired. She did a great book, Designed for Digital, which is basically about that digital transformation means that you need to walk on two legs. So
Right.
in that sense, digital transformation, very often it's presented as something where they are historyless, because which type of enterprise starts being digital today? No one. I mean, I cannot think of any company where they are not digital in any way. Because some of it, I mean, it's mandatory in Europe, for example, to have your bookkeeping must be digital. There's a law saying that in Europe. So even the smallest company,
Yeah.
they must have something digital. So digital
Exactly.
transformation is really thinking about changing the whole enterprise, meeting the customers in new ways, and crunching data in new ways, maybe using artificial intelligence or all the new technologies and so on, and moving to the cloud, and all this stuff we often talk about when we say digital transformation, but we forget that we are and have been very digital for many, many years, at least in countries like Denmark. So there's a lot of buzzword thing to digital transformation, but if it works, I mean, fine. We'll take it. And the thing for me is, obviously, this is an area where I can really come and say, this is the enterprise architecture, and we can see the plots and the holes in your approach strategy here and here and here,
All
because
right.
I have this comprehensive view of all the layers of the enterprise. So it's some people have said over many years that enterprise architecture is dead. It's not. It's
It's not at
thriving
all.
more than ever
Exactly.
because we
Yeah.
can solve some of the problems that we are facing more and more and more and more. But we need to be more integrative. We need to think about new, for example, new threats to the enterprise. So we need to integrate security thinking much more into our architecture and all kinds of resiliency issues, and also in the business models, and not just the sort of security and stuff, but and in a wider schema. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
That's a brilliant approach, and you've just given me the understanding about it. Like what and how do your take on the digital transformation in enterprises. I feel that enterprises, the more they adapt to the digital transformation, the better it is, and the better the world will become digital.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's still a
Perfect.
learning journey, though,
Yeah, yeah.
even for the best in the class. And we see that actually historically, some of the best in the class, if they relax too much,
Yeah.
then we have a challenge. We saw that with Kodak. They invented the digital photography, for Christ's sake. They didn't quite manage to sustain the leadership in the whole sector. Even, I mean, it's called the Kodak moment. If you relax too much and don't keep innovating and rethinking and renewing. So it's a continuous learning journey.
Well
And
said, John.
many enterprises forget that.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing this buzzword, the Kotak moment. Really, really, this is the first time I'm actually hearing it.
All right, no, no, it's well documented out there. Yeah.
All right. That's well said, John. Now, John, I would just like to ask you this, like, what is your take on the importance of the digital innovation in the EA space?
Well, I think part of it, I mean, I already mentioned this about walking on two legs and so on, the whole innovations part of the digital transformation. So it's part of enterprise architecture that we need to think about innovation. And more, it's key. We saw under Corona, for example, as an example, many retailers, they had a big problem. Many enterprises had a big problem with Corona. But if we take some of the retailers which had physical shops as the only option, and then suddenly lockdown, all shops are closed. We don't know when they can open. That was really a challenge to I mean, the whole of society. But if you just take retailers and shops and for example, there was a Danish company, luxury goods, so they make jewelry. They're big, Pandora. It's not a secret that they went into the fastest digital transformation and innovation that I have ever seen, at least, because they had shops on high streets in all cities all over the world and so on, and suddenly lockdown. So what do? Well, we innovate. We find a way to sell our stuff, jewelry, online. So they built an online shop. They found ways to distribute and so on. It's a complex thing to build e-business, obviously, but I mean it's fairly trivial at the end of the day. It's certainly something that's been done many times.
Exactly.
So Pandora just went ahead. That was the architecture team who took leadership of that whole transition. They had buy-in from management because, I mean, we lose money every day when the shops are closed. So can we at least have something where we sell something and online and ship it to people and so on? So that was the innovation in saying, here's a business opportunity. It's actually forced upon us that it's not our choice.
Exactly.
We haven't chosen to go in lockdown. So they needed to innovate. They did that very fast. And I know the architecture team there. They should, I mean, get a prize for what they did, really. So that's kind of where architecture can think about what's next, what's coming in the future. It was also enterprise architects in just keeping in retailing in several European big retailing companies. When Amazon opened the first fully automated supermarket over in San Francisco 10, 15 years ago, or whenever it was actually architecture teams who made study trips for the executives to come over and see that. Is that the future of our shops? No people in the shop. It's fully automated and so on, or what do we want to do? So architecture functions actually facilitated the decisions. They didn't make the decisions. They might have made secret plans of, well, we need to update these and those processes and capabilities and systems and so on, but they really facilitated, is this the future of retailing for us? In mergers and acquisitions, it's the same kind of situation where architecture is part of the due diligence and sort of pre-merger, but also obviously post-merger integration. And there's lots of innovation you need to think about there. Some of it is not really innovative in that sense, but sometimes you can jump ahead if you say we have huge technical debt. Maybe the way to innovate and get rid of the technical debt is to acquire someone who has less technical debt and then just roll out there. So it's business model innovation, also business operations innovation. It's not just technical innovation. That's lots of that. And we need to embrace that and be better. But the real enterprise architecture contribution to innovation is really when it's business model innovation, when it's business operations innovation.
Exactly. John, you were just talking about the supermarket example, just something actually, struck a bell with me. What I was thinking was in the COVID time, people should have actually thought about something called a disaster recovery kind of an automation where they would have, just employed the robots and just kept the robots in the brick and mortar shops, or let's say in the retailer shops, so that people can just go and buy the stuff they want. So I feel that whenever there's a disaster kind of a thing, people should think in advance about it and train the robots and keep them in place since humans are not, permitted to go there. So this is what I just came about with.
Yeah. But I mean, that's a good metaphor for resiliency. Fortunately, there's actually a lot of ISO standards and so on for what to do in this sort of. You need to have business impact analysis. So what happens if, and how do we deal with that? Is it build robots who pick up the goods or whatever? For business continuity planning, if the lights went out, how do we keep operating? And for disaster recovery, well, the meteor hit our head office. So how do we keep working? So there's well-defined ISO standards for that, and many enterprise architects during COVID, for example, picked up a lot of the standards and went and worked with the risk people, the government sort of GRC team, the CISO, the chief information security officers, and so on, because we need to help each other. And the best working EA teams I work with today, they have fully embraced security architecture into the enterprise architecture. Many CISOs don't like that because they love sitting in their silo. But that's the old-fashioned. That type of CISO will disappear in the future. It needs to be much more integrated, and that may also mean that the typical CIO will probably lose some of their terrain because there will be other executives who will take ownership. I see in big banks, for example, sometimes it's a re-empowered CIO, but very often it's actually the COO who takes ownership of the architecture and the security and the resiliency and so on. Right. So the CIO is more of a sub-function kind of, but it changes depending on how much trust is there to the CIOs and so on. But it's true, we need to think about this. I think key concepts for architecture today is in terms of resiliency, business continuity, and so on. And we need to be much better because it's frankly, I've seen so many sort of BIA business uh, uh, sort of continuity of operations and business impact analysis and so on. That I mean, I've seen students do a better job at some of what I see because
Right.
it's well, it's just something we need to get funding for something. It's not really serious business, but it will be. You need to have it like a pilot still needs to have their checklist when they, even the experienced pilots and airplanes, they still have checklist. Have we remembered that? Have we remembered that? And so
Right.
on. We
Yeah.
need the same with the impact analysis and so on to be sure that what happens when the next corona or when the
Happens.
next big
Yeah.
disaster and so on. So yeah, we need to have resiliency planning for that. And enterprise architects have a key role in that. And much of it is by being very innovative.
Absolutely. Absolutely, John. Apologies, John. There was a
All
little
right,
bit of an
all right.
outage from my end. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
no problem.
Yeah. So now, John, if I would just like to, ask you this, like, how are you able to link the nuance of the AI with that of the enterprise architecture?
Well, that's an easy question, isn't it? No. It's I think the I mean I was way back, a bit of history to that, just to explain why I don't see some of the stuff we see today as that new. When I was a young student and student in England, I mentioned I studied in England.
Yeah.
I was actually located at the social and educational applications of knowledge engineering research group at Brighton Polytechnic and co-located with Sussex University. That was basically an AI research unit.
Okay.
One of my first publications in 80 something was in a journal called AI and Society. So AI was something I taught back in the 80s. Obviously, AI was very different back then, but it was much of the same, helping in dealing with complex data and complex situations. Could say that's the prime thing for AI today. There's lots of other stuff in AI, but we can talk about that. But so I've been following AI ever since the early days in AI research, long before generative AI came along. And what I used it for was sort of in decision process support, basically. So from my view, AI is a great opportunity for us to use technology to help us make better decisions, to automate some decisions if we trust the technology enough. But also to help us be aware of stuff. And that depends on what is called the knowledge graph. Basically, if you have a good architecture, you build a knowledge graph, so you see all the dependencies at a detailed level. So it's
Exactly.
really working with what is called a meta model, but it's really also turning into a knowledge graph. So you see how it's all related. And the more you have a well-defined knowledge graph, the better AI solutions you can get. Because then it's not that you ask AI something, if it's generative AI, and today much is generative AI,
Right.
and it comes with stupid answers because it doesn't know. We saw that
Yeah.
with AI a lot, with the early generative AI solutions, ChatGPT in the first rounds and so on. It hallucinated about stuff. It still does, but it's
Yeah.
becoming better and better and better because it learns and it has its own knowledge graph kind of thing going on. So in the EA space, I think the EA tool vendors have picked up on AI big time. Some of them are better than others, but it's quite amazing stuff most of them are doing with AI, because an EA platform is perfect for using AI if you use it in the right way. And it can be all kinds of applications. When I worked for Qualiware, a Danish EA vendor, we worked with sort of neural network to read hand scribblings on a whiteboard and turn it into a formal model.
Okay.
That is AI in a nutshell, you could say, because it's interpretive and it's sort of, is that really a box or is it a circle and so on. We use that and it was early, but they have matured it over time. So you can auto-generate from a picture, a whiteboard drawing kind of, and say, make that into a formal model.
All right.
So that's AI applications. You can text to the EA tool and say, make that into a formal UML diagram or something. They're getting closer and closer to automating much of the modeling work, or to validate models and say, here's a model, what's wrong with that? Well, it executes the patient every time you go to the X-ray machine or something. I mean, that's an extreme stupid example, but just as an example, you can make interpretive stuff with AI based on the models. So lots is happening in the EA tools, and it's very exciting, I think. But it's also, some of it is really playing with sort of because we can, not that we really, customers really want this, but there will be stuff where we see it will be very beneficial. So AI is very disruptive for the architecture community. I think, and I don't have any sort of survey saying whether it's 30% or 70% of our tasks as architects that are deeply impacted, but it's very disruptive. Especially for the old-fashioned architects who love to sit and model all the time, because that's one area where we definitely see AI is taking over. If it's also the architects who write kind of boring documents for documentation and so on, AI is also very good at that. Even in formulating sort of more strategic documents, make a list of principles based on you read these and those strategies and situation reports and so on. AI is very good at what many enterprise architects have excelled in previously. So it's very disruptive for the architecture. Also for operational stuff, obviously. The future of, let's just take a random example because I'm starting to work with it in battlefield management. AI will disrupt very much on that for sure. You don't need to see many science fiction films to envision that the robots will come and so on. The battlefield will change because artificial intelligence are there. We see, I mean, Ukraine is building drones with AI so they can actually spot, is it a soldier, is it a civilian, or is it a tank, or is it a and so on and so forth. The Russians and the Chinese and the Americans and all others are probably also doing advanced stuff, but I know that was just a report the other day about the Ukrainians using AI in their drones. So it's coming in operational stuff, everything. I mean, we all know the self-driving car kind of example that's been around for many years. It's soon reality, and it probably is reality in some areas where I think Elon Musk, or is it, well, somebody launched the sort of driverless taxi in some regions and so on. Driverless trucks who ride on the highways and so on. So we see more and more AI coming in for all kinds of stuff. And I mean, the promises are great. AI will find the next cure for cancer and blah, 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 which probably is kind of true, really, because some of it is really deep research and number crunching and so on. But it will probably also, as I mentioned, be the next kind of battlefield and so on. So it's dystopian and utopian at the same time.
Yeah,
And we need
it
to
is. It
think
is.
about that as architects. When we bring in AI, what happens?
Yeah.
And some of it is really plain, simple security management. If somebody takes some confidential corporate data and puts it into some of the free
Mm.
AI engines out there, who knows where that data ends up, and so on. So there's lots of ethical issues about AI, even moral issues, corporate ethics kind of things, data privacy kind of things, and so on and so forth. So we're the technology is probably too fastly evolving for the ethics to follow, because right now the technology over the last 5 years has taken a giant leap in commercialization, at least, of AI.
Exactly.
But the ethics have not taken that same giant leap, and we see all kinds of challenges and now with I mean, all the politicking around it. We used to rely on being able from Europe to send data to US and see it being treated safely. Now we don't know with Trump's latest stuff about AI and so on. We don't know what the Chinese and the Russians and the blah, blah, blah are doing and so on. So it's exciting times to say in that sense. And I think all of it is really good old sense making from enterprise architects to think that type of data you are not allowed to put into ChatGPT. We can have some safe environments for some AI stuff, but not out in the public. You're not allowed to Google some stuff if you sit in a research and development unit in some companies, because we don't know what happens to that data.
Exactly.
So it's time for architecture functions to step up to this, because we see companies taking in chief AI officers and so on, and I'm not sure what these guys are doing. Like we saw cloud architects being specialists in selecting which functions in Azure can you use. That's fine, but is it architecture? I don't know. It's for me, it sounds like configuration kind of thing. So we need to think about the deeper architecture things. And that's why I love the idea that, for example, IASA, they have just launched an AI certification, AI architecture certification, which I think is great. That somebody who knows about it and have deep architecture knowledge about AI actually build education and certifications in this. So I
Right.
think the whole business technology domain is impacted by this AI, and we need to think about that. Even in my Carnegie Mellon training in the EA certification program, we actually talk about AI enabled this and that, because we need to think about it in the core training of architecture and architects. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely, John. I mean that's a very good point that is put across, especially with the nuance of the AI in the architect in the EA space. And I understand that certain designations have been taken a fault approach. They've been misunderstood on
Hmm.
that note. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, now, John, if I would just like to ask you this, like in the EA space, John, like what are the types of certifications and licenses have you been awarded with?
Yeah. Yeah. and this is probably not a good business strategy for my company, but I'm too proud to do certifications myself in that sense. I think I've done that. I was certified from Carnegie Mellon 25 years ago, and I thought that was the basic certification. I think and have been thinking, probably a bit naive, but anyway, I did my PhD, so I don't need to certify myself in TOGAF or in blah 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 blah. I can read the books and understand it and so on. If it's my staff, I do send my young person there on certain certifications and so on. But I since I did the Carnegie Mellon certification myself and then became accredited to certify people in it, I thought, well, then I'm the teacher, I'm not the student in that sense. So I've done many courses and so on, but I've only completed a few certifications over the years because I think that doesn't add value to my profile.
Right.
I actually know in some rigid consulting gigs, if it's sort of very much a marketplace with a broker and so on, I know I'm disqualified because I didn't take the TOGAF exam, for example. And I say, well, then I probably don't want that assignment anyway. So it's a bit of a luxury thing that I can allow myself to do that, but that's how I do. I do recommend people to do certifications once in a while. I'm not quite sure which ones I recommend, apart from my own Carnegie Mellon one now. Um, I mean, TOGAF is out there. It's probably useful for many architects to learn Archimate. And then there's the business technology certification from IASA that may be useful. And then I would say maybe do some like SAPSA, the security architecture. John Sherwood, who developed SAPSA, he just passed away recently last week, but I think SAPSA will continue to be the dominant security architecture certification. So yeah, there will be some that it's useful to study and well, yeah, do the certification exams if you want, but it's not been my priority personally.
That completely, understands the point. And yeah, I mean, that was a good plethora of list which you have, suggested for our listeners. And I'm pretty sure that our listeners also will go back to those pages and try to understand, okay, this is a good certification that we can start out with. Now, I'm pretty sure about this. Like, you've been part of multiple, international events. So, John, I would like to ask it from you. Like, how was your experience being part of these different international events, and what were your key learnings from them?
Yeah. I mean, I have one preferred event that I return to every year. I'm actually also an advisory board member and so on now. It's the RM UK. It's a commercial company in London who organizes conferences. And they have an annual enterprise and business architecture conference. It's co-located. This year, we co-located 3 conferences. So EA, well, enterprise and business architecture, business transformation and change, and service design. That was 3 conferences co-located in one. And I love the idea. Of course, I'm an advisory board member, so I'm sort of a mentor to the organizers. I actually also chair the jury of an award we give out at that conference. So I'm deeply committed to that conference. But I mean, it's a commercial conference. It's for practitioners. Some vendors also are there. But for some reason, I think this year vendors, they tend to, I don't know why, but we saw not that many vendors as sponsors this year. I think it's
Right.
because there's a disruption in the vendor space. Uh, Biz Design acquired Mega and all that kind of stuff for the EA tooling. But anyway, it's a practitioners meeting, and we select good practitioners, good stories, kind of, as speakers. So I love that conference because you take away lots of stories from real practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we gave a workshop also at that conference, and that was practice. We learned a lot also as the presenters, because there was a good dialogue and so on. So that's an annual thing. I go to London every year. I have my annual Indian curry in London, which is a favorite kind of thing for me. And I meet lots of friends because lots of people return to that conference. So that's definitely one I would put very high on my go-to list for conferences. I've attended a few Gartner things. Previously, Gartner did have an EA conference, but they don't have now. It's something, I don't remember what they called it, application and innovation or something. Gartner, they always make professional events. They're bloody expensive, and you have to live with its Gartner presentations. They might bring in a fashionable keynote, but it's really Gartner pushing their stuff. So if you don't like Gartner, stay away from those. But I think it's useful. When I worked for an EA vendor, we were sponsoring. So I went to the annual symposium in Barcelona in Europe for some, I don't know, 4 or 5 times or something. And I actually like that. I don't want to spend all the money as a small company because it's still very expensive. But actually, I think it's something that you could consider if you have well enough funding for conferences with the Gartner stuff. There's a few academic conferences that may be useful, but they are academic. So I mean, you gather a lot of people, and I mean, I hate the academic conference format where people read their papers. I mean, why the hell do you spend time on reading a paper if people have read the paper out front? But that's the way academic conferences work. It's a good community, and I sometimes go to, also because they tend to put them on nice places like Madeira or something to
Yeah.
get people to come to the conference. But you have to be sort of, I mean, I'm glad I had my PhD when I attend these academic conferences because it is presenting research. But I like that once in a while, also to meet some of my friends in the academic community. But it's not for the normal architects. Then I would say find local events. There's always local events in wherever you are, and go to those. Some of them are free because it's some whoever who arranges them. In Denmark, for example, the Computer World Denmark magazine, a newspaper, and news website, they organize a lot of conferences. I'm actually speaking at one in September about AI and EA actually, and they have dedicated conferences for EA in Denmark, and I'm sure it's the same many other places that you have semi-commercial, so sponsors pay for that, but it's typically free or very cheap for practitioners to participate. And then you can go and have a coffee while the sponsors are talking if you don't want to hear commercial kind of. But anyway, so there are, and go to conferences, go to community events, because it's very important to have a community, build relations in your networks and so on. So yeah, or establish communities of practice on your own. I know the Association of Enterprise Architects. I actually co-founded that with Scott Bernard way back. Then we gave it over to Open Group 10, 15 years ago. They haven't treated it very well, I have to say, but there are local chapters, and some of them are well functioning. So maybe the Association of Enterprise Architects could be useful.
Right.
If you're more into the wider sort of designerly approach and so on to architecture, there's a annual conference in Europe called the Intersection Conference. It's a community of architects and sort of identity brand people and UX kind of service design people.
Right.
That's a nice group of people. I think this year they are meeting in Brussels. I think I don't remember. You can Google and find out. It's also in September. I think they have their conference. So there's lots of conferences. Some dedicated EA, some where it's just very relevant for enterprise architects. And then, of course, all the tech conferences. There's the big one in Denmark, Europe, actually, it's growing. Go-to conferences, high quality for tech people. Um, I've often thought of going to their conferences. I know many of the people there, but I never had time to go. But lots of tech conferences, obviously. O'Reilly organizes conferences and all kinds of big tech conferences that may be useful. And then,
Now
of course,
that's
the vendors. Sorry, just
yeah.
to continue. The vendors, there's the bigger ones. Lean IX have their EA Community Day. I think Biz Design will continue. I don't know what happened there because they're reshaping their company after the merger. And several other EA vendors have some community events. That might also be useful. So lots of opportunities, and do set your annual target of attending at least one conference. Get in touch with me if you're interested in the London conference, because I can coach on, I mean, we have open call for presentations and so on. So I'm happy to talk with potential speakers, because we need a continuous flow of speakers. We just had the conference in June, so it will take some time next year. I'm not sure about the exact dates next year, but yeah.
That's brilliant, listeners. So basically, I mean, you just got it from John. Now, John has given you an open invite. If you have any interest, I mean, to join the events, you could just feel free to contact John, and he'll give you a complete guideline. And with respect to the different events. Now, John, like actually, before we actually conclude our podcast episode, let's take a lighter route. Now, we were just talking about the enterprise architecture, your journey. Then, we were just going front and back with respect to, the reformations, then, the initiatives, then the digital transformation, the digital innovation. Now we'll take a lighter route on your likes and interest. So in the form of a quick rapid fire round. So John, the first question to you. So John, if I ever visit Copenhagen, what is the place that you would recommend me to visit?
We have some great restaurants, world famous. So I would take you out for dinner at a very, very nice restaurant. I would say there's lots of places in Copenhagen that tourists appreciate. It's a clean city, it's a safe city, it's a beautiful city, and so on. So we have all kinds of, I mean, whether it's museums or parks or whatever. A canal tour could be one. So you on a boat see different sites in Copenhagen. That's a popular thing. And then in the outskirts of Copenhagen, there's beautiful places. We have some castles, for example, that many tourists like in Elsinore. Hamlet Castle, as it's called, popular. Like a old, I mean, 1600 or whenever built and so on. So nice place. So yeah, that's lots of options in Copenhagen for sure. But don't go only in the city center.
Sure.
See some of the sites. Have a local guide who takes you to some of the untraditional sites.
Surely, John. That's definitely there in my checklist. Now, John, like since you read a lot of books, what is your favorite book that you have read of all time?
All time, it's kind of a geeky one perhaps, but Richard Sennett, a famous sociologist, he wrote a book called The Conscience of the Eye. That's my all-time favorite book. It's about experiencing a city and how does the city speak to you and so on.
Okay,
It's a
right.
beautiful book. I read it probably 10 times or so. Like I love to return to good
10
novels and
times.
so on.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
huge number.
But it's like a story. He tells a story. It's not just a boring sociology book. So yeah, I would say that one is probably one of my all-time favorites. And all of his books, I mean, he's a beautiful writer.
All
It's
right.
it's dense sociological, so not everyone likes it, but for me, it's better than picking up a crime novel or something.
I know. Everyone has their own interest. Yeah, that's a very good recommendation. Now, John, what is that Danish, dish that everyone has to try?
A dish. Ah, uh, the traditional answer would be open sandwiches, which is basically luxury on rye bread with fish or meat or some vegetarian. So typically you have a selection of two or three of these sort of dishes, and you have a aquavit snaps and beer with it.
Okay.
So it's a typical lunch. Well, not
Hmm.
typical because it's quite heavy, but we have lots of places where they serve that for lunch. So that's a typical Danish dish, even though it varies on whether it's fish or shrimp or salmon or meatballs or pork or whatever.
All right.
But that's a nice one because you also have the selection. So if you don't like pork, then you can avoid pork and so on and so forth. Of
Right.
more
Right.
traditional dishes, we have classic uh, classic dishes that are sort of old school, basically some of the same that was made 100 years ago. Some of that is also great for us Danes. Some people find it a bit strange. My Japanese sensei, he loved the Danish herring.
Ah,
So
okay.
that's a lunch thing for us in Denmark, but some people also like it for breakfast. I hate it for breakfast, but in some hotels they serve it for
Yeah.
breakfast. So when he visit me, he has herring for breakfast. He insists we go out and have herring for lunch, and he even asks, "Can we have herring for dinner?"
Oh wow. So you just love the taste so much. Okay. That's a pretty different choice again, I
Yeah,
could say.
yeah.
So John, like what's your favorite movie that you love to watch every time?
Ah, well, if I can include TV series, because I'm more of a
Absolutely.
TV series, but well, for movie, I'm ramping up to see the next 20, what is it, 28 years after or later. That just came up in cinemas. But the two previous ones, 20 days, 27, 28 days later and 28 weeks later, I think they're called a classic zombie and it's kind of scary stuff. But I loved the sort of way of making those movies. They tell a deeply unsettling story. In terms of TV series, I and again, I think this must be eighth time or so. I just started seeing the West Wing again. That's my all-time favorite TV show about the White House.
Okay.
And it's Aaron Sorkin who wrote the screenplay, and it's such an intelligent dialogue. That's one of the things that it's beautiful. and the actors are great and so on. So I love that being sort of old politicking kind of
Right.
person. So yeah,
That's a brilliant choice, John. Now, John, what is that famous Danish quote that everyone has to be aware of?
quote:
Yeah.
"Things take time."
Okay. How do you put it
That's
in
an
Danish?
author who a poet. He has a longer piece of poetry on that one, but basically TTT, things take time.
Things take
And
time.
I think that goes for our enterprise architecture for sure.
Yeah.
That we don't make big changes overnight.
Right.
It's too risky. So I
Yeah.
think that's a good solid kind of advice for people and for practitioners. And it's a very Danish kind of quote. Um,
All right.
of course, there's many other famous Danish quotes, but I think this one speaks to architecture very much.
Very much relatable to the architects and relatable to the episode, to the session that we had entirely. Right. So, John, how do you put it across in your language? I want to, hear it you saying in Danish.
In Danish.
Yeah, in
So what do you
Danish.
want me to say?
You could just say things take time. You could just translate that in Danish for
Ah,
me.
yeah, ting tager tid. So even the TTT works in Danish.
Okay.
Things take time. Ting tager tid.
Things are too. Okay. That's pretty interesting. That's good to know. That first time I've actually heard it, speaking, I mean, hearing the Danish language because I've actually visited the Nordic countries myself, but I've not visited Denmark yet. So that's always there in my
Oh, you
wish
have to
list.
come. You have to come over.
Definitely, definitely, John. For sure. I would love to. Yeah. So, John, finally, thank you so much for, taking time from your busy schedule and, being part of this initiative, the TechOSpace podcast. It was such an honor having you, especially the way you just taught to, took me across your journey, walk me through the enterprise architecture, linking it with digital transformation, the e-government and how you found the difference between the Swedish government and the Denmark government and, the digital innovation and AI. They were like solid points. So I just really had a great time conversing with you. So thank you once again. And, it was lovely having you.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I really enjoyed our conversation here. So thank you.
So, listeners, on this note, this is your host, Akhil Navluri, signing off. We will be back with another podcast episode with another industry leader very soon. Till then, keep listening. Take care, stay tuned, goodbye, and au revoir. Thank you.